the parents got killed, and he was found abandoned and just roaming around. So he came in here as a little cub, probably just 1 week old from birth. And so he's been hand-raised here. And we call him Rafiki, and Rafiki means friendship in Swahili. Rafiki? Hey, Rafiki. Okay, I got something for you. You're such a good boy. My name is Alex Droma, Education Officer at the Wildlife Education Center, the leading biodiversity conservation center in Africa.
This is the Uganda Wildlife Education Center, a place where dedicated men and women like Alex commit each day to the protection and conservation of the country's wildlife species. I'm Marlena Moreno, a conservationist with a passion for sharing the stories of people and places doing wonderful things to protect wildlife and their habitats. And on a recent trip to Uganda, I was lucky enough to spend a few days at the center, not only learning about what they're doing to help the country's wildlife, but I was also given an opportunity to get up close and personal with some of their ambassador species. The challenges of conservation are only becoming harder to combat, but that hasn't stopped places like the Uganda Wildlife Education Center from doing their very best in the name of global conservation. And I couldn't be more honored to help share their story.
The Uganda Wildlife Education Center was established way back in 1952 as an animal orphanage with the purposes of conservation education, rescue, rehabilitation, and breeding of endangered wildlife species. The center is really self-sustaining, but in the low seasons, there's really not a lot of money to run the center. So other than the friends of the center and the programs that we have developed to generate money to run this center, there's no other source of income that comes.
And like many conservation institutions, the center's ability to help wildlife relies solely on financial support from donors, visitors, and volunteers. An added challenge to the already difficult task of protecting Africa's biodiversity. In order to keep the center running, its staff has created unique programs that bring in much-needed financial resources while allowing visitors and volunteers once-in-a-lifetime wildlife experiences.
On the side of the on-site programs, we have a keeper for the day where someone interested comes in and goes through the chores of the day. And then we also do have the long-stay volunteers that come and have hands-on experience. And last but not least, we have exhibit-based tours where the staff and volunteers take visitors behind the scenes and introduce them to some of the key species like the rhinos and talk about conservation issues and preservation of wildlife. And finally, we also have the Chimpanzee Close-Up, and this is a very beautiful program where we have one-on-one with our baby chimps.
In order to ensure they are promoting responsible wildlife tourism, the center requires visitors to undergo a brief training and provide proof of up-to-date vaccines to participate in this program. During the one-hour interaction, keepers like Ronald also focus on educating visitors about the threats facing this species, such as poaching for bushmeat and the pet trade. Learning about each chimp's story and how the center is translating these orphans' misfortune into hope for wild populations is just another example of how the center is doing its very best to protect wildlife and inspire conservation. In addition to helping fund daily operations, the proceeds generated from the center's on-site programs, gate collections, and its generous donors also allow the center to work within the community.
So we go out to the communities and talk about conservation issues like wetland degradation, forest degradation, the bushmeat issues, poaching, and how we can curb some of this. We also have the children's conservation camps where we bring children from disadvantaged communities and preach conservation education, because we look at the younger generation as our primary focus.
Being just 5 minutes away from the country's only international airport, the Uganda Wildlife Education Center is undoubtedly one place tourists shouldn't miss. With over 55 different species, the center acts as a window to the country's conservation needs, and its visitors and its donors can be confident that their support is truly helping dedicated people like Alex safeguard Africa's wildlife and their homeland for generations to come.